Colman by Monica Furlong, Chapter 10. "What's wrong with Cormac's face?" the prince asked us curiously the next day. "He had leprosy," Wise Child replied, "and then a healer cured him, though she couldn't get rid of the scars. My sister is, I suppose, a healer, in Dalriada, where you come from. I have not seen her for many years. My parents could not understand how someone with her background and education could want to go off and live among peasants, and I was really too young to think about it, but it was odd." "She must have been a rather special sort of person," said Wise Child. "Yes, I think she was. I wondered if you ever heard tell of her. Her name was Ninnock, though I believe the local people had their own name for her." "It is a large country, Dalriada," Wise Child said, without having to lie. Sitting there, looking into eyes so like junipers, while the prince talked of her, was a strange experience. The prince and Cormac began to meet regularly in the afternoon to exercise Golden and for Cormac to practice racing him. Quite often we went along too, and while Prince Brangwyn rode on his horse, we got the chance to talk at length to Cormac. We told him all about our sessions with Uni, our friendship with the prince, and the encouraging sense that somehow some plan was coming together, though we did not quite know how. At this stage, Uni had said nothing to us about meeting Juniper. It was like her to withhold information. Cormac was relieved to be in touch with us again. He had felt a certain responsibility for Wise Child when they had set off together, and had felt bad that he barely saw her when they both started work at Caerleon. My arrival there had made him feel better. Uni's presence was also deeply comforting to him, as, of course, it was to us. "It is impossible to understand how it can all work out," he said. "One just has to trust in the power of the Dorans. But it is difficult to see how Caerleon, with all its power, could ever be overthrown." He shared the fear of Marut that was common to all the workers in the castle. They would do almost anything to avoid coming face to face with her, but most of his working hours had been spent performing humble tasks in the Grey Knight's apartment. "What is he like?" Wise Child asked. "Handsome, as cruel as Marut, and much cleverer than her. If anyone will catch Uni out in her plans, it will be him." Much of the time, talking to the prince and listening to Uni, we could pretend to ourselves that what we were engaged upon, trying to find a way to save and restore Castle Dor, was not as dangerous as all that. But comments such as Cormac's would remind us again that we could easily lose our lives, probably in a terribly painful way. Even Wise Child turned paler as he talked. I noticed that when Wise Child talked to Uni, she pushed her to let her take greater risks in conversation with the prince, to let him realize, at least partially, that we were his allies. Privately, Wise Child said to me, "I don't think she understands how close we are to the prince." Cautious as ever, I had a lot of sympathy with Uni. Wise Child's boldness was all very good, but one sentence too far would be irretrievable. It would expose the prince's attitude to Marut, whether of rebellion or subservience, and that in turn would expose us. Yet the birthday celebration was coming closer, and we were pretty sure that Uni's intention was for something dramatic to occur then. Uni had a way of snubbing Wise Child whenever she tried to bring the subject up, which I thought was a great mistake. Wise Child could respond to reason, but she had too firm a belief in her own powers to let Uni put her down. "I think we are wasting our opportunity," she said once, and Uni looked fiercely at her and said, "Hold your tongue, child," which at once lit a rebellious flame in Wise Child's eye. A crisis came one afternoon when we were out in the field with the prince and Cormac. The prince had just galloped Golden himself. He was demonstrating some way of controlling the bay to Cormac, and had, of course, been shadowed by Marut's soldiers. They always kept well out of his way, but they were unmistakably there, watching him, ready to surround him if he went further than the boundaries permitted him. He returned to us, slid off his horse, and watched Cormac mount Golden and ride away. I could sense his depression. "It should be me," he murmured under his breath. "Then let it be," Wise Child suddenly said. "Ride the horse in the race. You could probably outgallop the soldiers in any case. Your horse is much better than theirs." A look of anger crossed the prince's face. "Did Marut send you to trap me?" he asked sharply. The absolute astonishment of Wise Child was her best defense. "How can you say such a thing? I see how you love to ride and how much you love Golden. Why should you not ride him on your birthday?" "It would never be allowed, that's why." He spoke shortly, and I could hear him breathing fast with anger. "Don't let on that you are going to ride him," Wise Child went on. "Pretend that Cormac is going to do it, and then at the last minute ride yourself. You will be gone before they can do anything." "Are you mad?" asked the prince roughly. "I have to live here, do I not? What is worse, if I behave badly, the people of Castle Dor suffer. Did you know that? Every time I disobey Marut, the people in the village are punished." Wise Child was speechless for a few moments. "That is terrible," she said. "I did not know that." "And so," the prince shrugged, "I am helpless. There is no way out of my situation." Wise Child reported part of this conversation to Uni, leaving out the part where she had come close to inciting the prince to rebellion. "Ah," said Uni, "another clue to the prince's frame of mind. You see how right I was to make you wait." Uni never minded being irritating or saying, "I told you so." Wise Child raised an eyebrow at me when Uni wasn't looking and shrugged dramatically. "I think soon we will need to talk more frankly to the prince," Wise Child said, not prepared to let it go. "Do you indeed?" replied Uni, and said no more. What I could see very well was that if Wise Child had not exactly talked frankly to the prince, she had at least opened up a train of thought in him that he was bound to pursue. If we had been trying to work out whether we could trust the prince, now he, equally, must be wondering how far we were to be trusted. Sure enough, our conversations began to include what I thought of as fishing lines lowered into the depths to elicit revealing answers. "So what do you make of Marut?" he asked one day. "Powerful," replied Wise Child, in a voice that could have been conveying admiration. "As a foreigner, I don't quite understand the situation, however. Why are you not ruling in your own kingdom? Why does she control the future king of Castle Dor? Or have I misunderstood something?" "It's a long story," the prince said shortly. But as I explained before, I have no choice. Wise Child did not leave it at that. Do you want to rule your own kingdom? She pushed. I realize that you are very young and that kingship is a heavy responsibility. But when you are a bit older, perhaps? Her apparent innocence was very convincing. It was as if she had no idea of the tragic history of Castle Dor. The prince gave a groan, but did not reply. Before our next meeting, Wise Child primed me to push things a little further. With some trepidation, I agreed. So, after your birthday celebrations, I said, will things start to change for you? The result was astonishing. It was as if I had, with my fairly dull question, brought about a change in the prince, a landslide of emotion. Though no doubt, ever since we had started getting to know him, this moment of crisis had been approaching. His great dark eyes filled with anger, fear, and hope? I could not tell. There is something going on here, he said in a strangled voice. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether you are spies. I don't know what your game is. We are your friends, said Wise Child quietly. We are here to help you. You, not Marut, in any way we can. Why? He asked. We cannot tell you that at the moment, but trust us. No harm shall come to Castle Dor through us, or at least not if we can help it. We want to see Castle Dor restored, and you as its rightful king. If I had doubted the essential goodness of Prince Brangwyn up till then, I knew at that moment that he was not Marut's cat's paw, that his hope, his ambition, his passion was to rule on his father's throne and to deliver his people. There was a long silence. Then the prince said in a very small, humble voice, I think I am going to have to trust you. I don't exactly know why, but I do trust you. Quite right, said Wise Child in her most grown-up voice. You won't regret it. Carefully, we did not tell the prince about Finbar and the arms. We did not feel that this was our secret to tell. But we told him that plans were afoot to bring about change, though we were not at liberty to divulge the details so far as possible. They would not risk the lives of his people. For goodness sake, though, said Wise Child, don't start looking more cheerful. Go on being sulky and miserable. The prince laughed. Well, that's torn it, said Wise Child as we marched back to Uni. The cat's out of the bag now, I suppose. I suppose I had better go and make a clean breast of it. Naturally, I went with Wise Child and claimed an equal part in the revelation that we had made to the prince. I was dreading the encounter with Uni. I was dreading the encounter because Uni, even in a good temper, was quite formidable. I could imagine that when she was angry, she might be terrifying. She did the oddest thing, however. Wise Child, without a trace of penitence, poured out the story of what had been said. Instead of losing her temper or even uttering a rebuke, Uni burst out laughing. So the little girl knows better, does she? She said, almost admiringly. Not so little, said Wise Child. Well, you've done it now, said Uni. Don't blame me if you end up in Marut's dungeon. Don't expect me to lift a finger to save you. I certainly should expect it, said Wise Child, by now in a cheeky mood. Just as I would do what I could to save you. Perhaps because Wise Child had taken charge in a way unexpected to Uni, Uni began to explain to us that Juniper would be coming to the castle for the birthday celebration, and that the point of this would be a concentration of Doranic powers. The combined effect of myself and Juniper will work like scales against the counter magic of this dreadful place, said Uni. And of course, my Doranic powers, too, put in Wise Child. Maybe, said Uni, not denying it. Around this time, I began to have bad dreams. I would wake sweating on my hard pallet in the room adjoining Uni's, and try to throw off the sense of fear. Usually the dream was about being pursued, sometimes by a shadow, sometimes by Marut herself. You can imagine my concern when suddenly Marut sent for me and Wise Child. She will see you in her workroom, said the footman who gave us her order. Uni herself was busy elsewhere in the castle, so we had no chance to discover whether she had arranged or expected this meeting. With sinking hearts, we found our way to Marut's workroom. When the door opened, it was into a strangely dark room, with a number of tables holding mysterious objects, flasks of liquid, bundles of herbs, amulets hung from nails, a staff or two leaning against the wall. The deep shadows and shape of the room, which was long and thin, gave it the sinister feeling of a cave. I noticed a rat nibbling at one of the bundles of herbs, and it eyed us with its hot, hostile glance. The room had an unpleasant smell. There was a huge fireplace with a fierce fire and a pot bubbling upon it. It gave out a noxious plume of smoke. At first there was no sign of Marut, and we waited in a frightened silence for some minutes. It may have been my imagination, but I thought I could hear groans and little cries of suffering from a huge cupboard that stood in the corner. Then Marut emerged out of the dimness, leaning heavily on a stick. She sank into a large carved chair and pointed speechlessly with her stick to a couple of footstools, on which we quickly sat down. "So how are the birthday preparations going?" Marut asked. Her voice had so much habitual scorn in it that it was difficult to tell whether she was mocking us or whether this was just the way she usually talked. Wise Child, always readier with speech than myself, plunged into a description of Prince Brangwen's orders and the people we had briefed to carry them out. "And the prince," said Marut icily, "is he looking forward to the celebration?" "Very much," lied Wise Child promptly. She is a naturally truthful girl, but protecting the prince was our first concern. "The prince seems to feel that he should be allowed to participate in the wrestling and fighting," Marut said. "Of course, it is unthinkable for someone of his degree to demean himself in that way, or for that matter in the horse race. Someone might beat him, for example." Wise Child nodded vigorously. Marut watched her with her strange, light eyes, as concentrated as a cat watching a mouse. "That must not happen," Wise Child said. "You realize," said Marut, "that if anything goes wrong with the preparations, anything, you will both be punished severely." "Quite right," said Wise Child. "We must take responsibility, of course." When we were outside again and on our way back to our room, I said to Wise Child, "Where are the protections?" "I am wearing the silver moon, and I have the black egg and the cloth of disguise bottle in my pocket. I had to leave the flask behind because it is too big to carry." We are going to have to find a safer hiding place for it, maybe outside the castle. Wise Child was sufficiently frightened by our encounter with Marut to agree with me for once without argument. And she went at once to the cupboard in our room where the flask was carefully hidden, first behind a pile of candlesticks and odds and ends of candles, and then behind a few clothes. Wait, I know it's in here. Wise Child swept the clothes out of the way and began removing the candle ends and the candlesticks. It's just at the back here, it's... Her voice died away. Colman, it isn't here. She's found us out, I said. She'll know it was a magical object. We looked at each other with white, stricken faces. Not only had we lost a very precious protection given to us by the mother, but almost certainly Marut now suspected us. We tried to convince each other that someone else might have taken the flask, Uni, for example, or a servant sent to find a candlestick, or someone merely curious. But it was not easy to see why anyone who did not know its worth would want to steal a flask containing an unknown liquid. To our huge relief, Uni entered at that moment, and we poured it all out to her, our encounter with Marut and the loss of the flask. It always took a lot to disconcert Uni, but she turned perceptibly paler and sat down rather quickly. None of us were in the least doubt of the potential cruelty of Marut, and of course, since Uni had employed us, she too might partake in our downfall. I must make an excuse to go and see Marut, she said. I will try to discover whether she suspects me, or whether she will tell me she suspects you of working against her. In the meantime, carry on as usual. You have little choice. Go to see Prince Brangwyn this afternoon. If you see an opportunity, push the conversation further, to the possibility of his escape. There is little to lose now, and this may be your last chance to talk to him. We none of us know what may happen in the next day and night. Keep up your courage and know that whatever happens, I will do my best to help you. I will try to find Cormac and tell him the details. With luck, it will not occur to Marut to suspect him. And with that, Uni was gone. We felt fearful and alone without her. Promptly, at our usual time, we presented ourselves to the prince. I could detect no change in him. Whatever Marut was thinking, she had not shared her dark broodings with him. Wise Child scarcely even pretended to carry on a normal conversation. Within a few moments, she was saying, "You may not see us again, sir. Marut, we think, has decided that we are a danger to you." The prince's eyes widened with surprise. "Why?" "What you don't know about us is that we are friends with your lost sister, Ninnock, whom I know as Juniper," Wise Child said. "I was trained by her in magic. We came here especially to try to help you and Castle Door. And it is not too late to do so. Great forces of magic are gathering here on your behalf, and the people of Castle Door may secretly rise against Caerleon. But for that to happen, you need to escape and become their leader. They love and admire you still, and would do anything for you. You must escape on horseback on the day of the race, outgallop all the other horsemen, and make your way to Castle Door." "What are you thinking of?" said the prince. "I shall be a marked man from the moment I get on the horse, and even if I get away, I will be followed back to Castle Door. It is impossible." "Not at all," Wise Child said. From her pocket she produced the glass bottle with the scrap of fabric. I have here a magical protection called the Cloth of Disguise. If you and Cormac cut the cloth in half just before the race, and you carry half each, for a while he will appear to be you, and you will appear to be him, down to the very clothes you both stand up in. By the time Cormac begins to look like himself again, you will be well away, halfway back to Castle Door." "I don't believe it," said the prince. "It is true," I said. "Unlikely as it sounds, it really works like that. What have you got to lose, anyway? If the spell does not work, you won't get farther than the end of the field. But if it does work, it gives you a chance to take on your own power." The prince gazed at me with a terrifying intensity as I spoke, then gave a sort of groan as the possibilities sank in. Wise Child handed him the little bottle, and as if this kind of thing were the most natural in the world, he carefully hid it in his robe. I found myself sighing with relief. That was one protection out of the way. "I will do it," he said at last. "As you say, what is to be lost?" A silence fell among us, but it was an eloquent silence. We stared at one another, drawing comfort from one another's faces. "Why now?" said the prince at last. "We have reason to think Marut suspects us," I said, "which may mean that you will not see us again." "That means you are in danger?" "Yes, it does." The prince groaned again. "In order to help me." "And Castle Door," Wise Child said, "and Juniper." As if her comment had reminded him, the prince said, "Tell me about my sister. You know, I have not seen her for many years. She was young and beautiful when she left." "She is still beautiful," said Wise Child, "and a woman full of power, so full of power that she was driven from her home by those who hated her, and she came here to ask for refuge." "So where is she?" "Not far away." A tiny sound suddenly made me turn. Standing just inside the room was Marut, with that horribly intent gaze that I found so troubling. How much had she overheard, I wondered. "That will do," she said. "I think, Brangwen, these children need not trouble you again. The preparations for your birthday are all but complete. Come with me," she said to us. And she pushed us in front of her through the door of Prince Brangwen's room and closed it firmly behind her. "We shall meet again very soon," she said ominously to us. "Meanwhile, go back to your room and stay there till I send for you." Even as she spoke, I noticed a spasm pass through her as if she was in great pain. She struggled to get control of herself. "Go," she said in a voice that turned into a gasp. And without waiting for further instructions, we fled. We had hoped to find Uni in her room when we returned, but there was no sign of her. We hung around waiting, not daring to go away, even in search of supper, but still she did not come. This frightened us. Not only did we desperately need to share our encounter with Marut with her, but we also feared that we had endangered Uni, and that she, too, would now become an object of suspicion. Finally, we went to bed. Wise Child fell asleep almost at once, but I tossed and turned for what felt like hours, until I plunged into an exhausted sleep, full of lurid dreams. In one of them, I could see Marut's eyes watching me through a window. For some reason, I was trying to stand between the window and Wise Child, who was with me in the room, so that Marut would not know that Wise Child was there. There was a noise of shouting. A harsh voice was saying, get up, and shaking me roughly. Then, in horror, I realized that I was being shaken roughly, pulled and dragged out of bed. I forced myself awake, wrested myself free from the grasp that held me, and found that one of Marut's huge soldiers was standing over me, shouting at me. I turned desperately to look for Wise Child, but her bed was empty. Get dressed, the soldier shouted at me. Where is my friend? I asked. None of your business. Get dressed. Where is my friend? I won't get dressed until you tell me. He knocked me down with a single blow. You will do what I tell you. Pushing and prodding, he hurried me, more or less dressed, downstairs till we came to the part of the castle that I recognized as belonging to Marut. He forced me into Marut's workroom, where I was immensely relieved to see Wise Child standing alone, watched over by another huge soldier. We looked at each other in fear. They are bound to search us, Wise Child said to me in our own language. What will Marut say when she sees the silver moon and the black egg? Where are they? I asked. In the pocket of my coat. I dared not leave the egg behind, and I slipped the silver moon off on my way here. Just then Marut emerged, as she had done before, from the shadows of her dismal room. Uni accompanied her and carried the flask of purple liquid. Marut looked much sicker. She was deathly pale, and her eyes seemed to be sunk in her head. I felt sure that I was looking at a woman gravely ill. Uni at once began to scold us. I am appalled to learn that you appear to have abused my lady's hospitality, she said. She was good enough to employ you, but it would seem that you had another purpose in coming here. She tells me that a magical object was found among your possessions. What magical object? Asked Wise Child. A flask of purple liquid, this flask here. It was given to us by a friend before we left home. We took it so as to not hurt her feelings. We had no idea what it was for. It sounded a lame excuse. My lady believes that you have been plotting with the prince. Plotting what? We have come from Dalriada. We have no interest in the politics of Cornwall. We thought the prince was lonely and needed the company of young people, and we tried to cheer him up. We played chess with him, and I played the harp and sang to him, and we watched him race his horse. It may appear that this was all said fluently by Wise Child, but this is not the case. The stress of the occasion did not help her use of Cornish. She stumbled badly over her words, hesitating, getting things wrong, mumbling, stopping and starting. In the end, Marut stopped her and turned to Uni. I believe you told me you have traveled in Dalriada and can speak their appalling language, she said. Tell them in words they can understand what they are accused of, and what will be done to them if they do not confess. My lady Marut regards you as traitors, Uni said icily in our own language, and intends to have you confined in her dungeons until you confess. What I would like to know, she went on in the same stern and emphatic tone, is whether you have any of the protections on you, and if so, where they are. Wise Child, managing to sound rebellious, answered her. The silver moon and the egg, both are in my coat pocket. They refuse to confess, my lady, Uni said to Marut in Cornish. I think they need to be taught a lesson. Very well, said Marut. The soldiers shall take them to the small dungeon, search them, and leave them there for the night. I do not think they will need blankets or food. It is cold in the dungeon, and that should help concentrate their minds." "Quite right, my lady," said Uni. "They won't need their coats, either." She leaned over and twitched Wise Child's coat away from her, and one of the soldiers wrenched my coat from my shoulders and threw it to Uni. "I will see both of them in the morning," said Marut, a world of venom in her tone. "They deserve everything that's coming to them," said Uni viciously, tucking our coats under her arm as spitefully as if she had wished it was us she was holding. "How dare they abuse my lady's hospitality?" I can barely describe our wretchedness that night. The soldiers hustled us down flights and flights of stairs, where the air grew colder and colder, and the feeling of being surrounded, weighed down, by stone became more and more oppressive. Worse, as we approached the dungeons, we could hear cries from the prisoners. As we drew nearer, we could see that Marut and the knight had the prison cells made like cages with bars at the front. This gave the prisoners no privacy, not even the privacy of prison. But it also meant, it occurred to me, that Marut could enjoy the sight of human creatures locked up like animals. She could feed off their despair and pain.